solitary confinement. It's damaging and dangerous, and therefore many of the states and senators and government officials have sought for reform within the juvenile system. And this is due to the problems that are brought forth from solitary confinement. Which brings me to why I'm talking to you about this. When I first learned about this in one of my classes this year, I became so interested in what this does to other people that I began researching more about it. And today, I will try to persuade you with some of the research I have found out, and hopefully get you to seek reform for this problematic practice, which will in turn help keep these people safe. So let's begin with a story that comes from the William and Mary Law Review Journal. This is the story about William. William, a 15-year-old boy sent to a facility for 225 days. And during those 225 days, he spent 178 of those days trapped in confinement. In there, he had no books, no entertainment, no music of any kind. And eventually the isolation started getting to him. Within a couple of days, he had hallucinations, auditory hallucinations as well. He began throwing bodily fluids against the walls. And eventually he couldn't take it anymore, so he decided and tried to kill himself by cutting his wrists. But the guards were able to stop him. In total, during that 178 days, he tried to kill himself a total of 5 times. This has prompted many people to seek reform as a result. And he also tried to hang himself. Sorry. Now you're probably wondering, why should I? Oh, yeah. This is an average cell in solitary confinement. For William's cell, it was 7 feet by 7 feet. And some cells are even smaller than that. There was a picture I found online. The girl could not put her arms farther than this apart in one of them cells. So basically, it's about this big by this big. Some are even smaller. Some are like boxes. And by the way, this window, kind of fake. A lot of them don't have windows. They're usually artificial light and usually very dimly lit. Okay? Now you're probably wondering, why should I care about these kids? Well, after they're released with these problems, they receive very little to no therapy at all to deal with these problems, and they become a danger to society as a result. There have been many reports of people being harmed or even killed by these individuals as a result of these problems that are caused. And these crimes only land these kids back into the very environment that created these problems. So, here in the US, solitary confinement is used in almost every single correctional facility, even though it was outlawed in the adult system due to its violation of the 8th Amendment, which is against cruel and unusual punishment. And so let's start learning more about this problem and how it can be reduced. According to the website Solitary Watch, solitary confinement means the practice of isolating people in closed cells for 22 to 24 hours a day, virtually free of human contact for periods of time ranging from days to even decades. And according to the book Sunbelt Justice, it started in the early 1800s based on Quaker ideology and rose to become one of the most feared punishments in the system. But unknown to many, it is actually used for more than just the type of punishment. It is also used for isolating prisoners who are a danger to themselves or others. It is used to house the mentally ill and treat them should they need it. And it's also used for protection from people that need it, such as homosexuals, transgenders, former guards, policemen. The list goes on and on. Now let's move on to some of the problems it can cause, starting with how this starts. Basically, they have no contact with anybody. Even when they're allowed out of their cells, they shower and they get some exercise. And when they exercise, they're completely alone. The only people that are there are the guards, and the guards are not allowed to talk to them. So these people are basically like not allowed to talk, not allowed to see, contact, or be with anybody while they're in confinement. And this is actually a drawing from an artist based on accounts from solitary confinement. She basically said, you're basically a prisoner in your own mind, and you are your own worst enemy. And this artist beautifully depicted this in a most horrendous way. So starting with the problems, there are actually 3 main problems of confinement, and they came from the Iowa Law Review Journal. They are physical, psychological, and developmental. Psychological, as you have heard in William's story, is basically it can happen in a multiple ways. Hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, stuff like that. Physical, this happens when people are hurting themselves trying to get out of confinement. People have to slam themselves against walls, cut themselves, hang themselves as a result. With developmental problems, it became sort of a problem. With juveniles, their brains are still developing, and it caused a bunch of problems and actually caused brain damage as a result. Okay. Now let's talk about some of the reforms that have been caused. Some of the bills I found on the Library of Congress's website was S3432 and HR 3399. Both were trying to reform the system, but none of them were able to because they never got passed. But these did actually influence some states into instituting reforms. But only 15 states at most have put in place reforms as a result. And not many are actually trying to do this today. Some of the reforms include removing the prisoners that only really need to be, only using confinement as a last resort. Never putting anyone who is mentally ill or under the age of 18 in there, and also for some other reasons I forgot. So what do I want you to do? I want you to seek reform. Call your governments. Call the people that are in charge. I want you to make sure that these people go in and seek reform, because these kids are actually suffering in this system, in this environment, and it is only getting worse for them as the days go by. Thank you very much.